Welcome, everybody, one and all, to the Ultimate Hockey Show. Technical difficulties on my end, rectified, thanks to a willing participant for letting me use a computer. Uh, Thank you very much. Welcome to the Ultimate Hockey Show. Michael Dale alongside with Petty. Just so everybody knows, I'm not using my normal computer, so I don't have access to changing banners on the fly here. But nonetheless, it is a hockey conversation that we're going to have. I do
Stanley
want to
Cup
comment.
final. Stanley Cup final. Stanley Cup final. There it is.
Correct. I'm going to change it here as you start talking, I think, Brett.
Okay.
Anyway, Michael Joe on the left, Brett Petty on the right. Welcome to the show. Your Monday ritual airing on Tuesday because of scheduling conflicts, such as me being in a dental chair when we were supposed to do the show last night. Nonetheless, thank you for bearing with us. Who knows? Because, there may be a blessing in disguise to doing the show tonight because our takes would have been horrendous yesterday about how the season was on the verge of being over. And now Tampa winning the game has suddenly changed a few perspectives, at least for 48 hours. But anyway, that being said, with Petty, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Not bad. Dental issues taken care of. Not issues, but needs taken care of. And ready to chat hockey for the next 35 minutes or so. So, Rick, game one of the Stanley Cup final goes to overtime. It goes the way of the hometown Colorado Avalanche. And then you get that beatdown that we saw in game number two. Last night's result withstanding. What were your impressions of the series going into last night?
Okay. Before last night's game, you're saying?
Yeah, before last night's game. So take last night's game out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I would say, first of all, Colorado on full display with their speed and with their talent and their enthusiasm. I think they have a real hunger for wanting to win, especially Nathan MacKinnon. I mean, that's part of any superstar's legacy, right? It's the same thing that Connor McDavid is chasing after, and that Ovechkin did for the longest time before Washington won, and Crosby had to work at before he got it. So the superstars, to set them apart, to get their real sort of moment in hockey time, forever enshrined in the Hall of Fame and in everyone's mind and everything else, you have to win a championship. Otherwise, you're like a superstar, but there's an asterisk, right? Same thing with Mary Lemieux, with Wayne Gretzky, the list goes on and on. So I think Nathan MacKinnon is just playing like a man on a mission. He's just like, he's just incredible. He's an incredible hockey player. He's healthy this year. His speed, like he's just in the prime of his career. And so Colorado is just following him. And I think those first two games, even though they got up 3-1 and then they let Tampa Bay back into the game with, a couple of power play goals, I think it was in the second period, that changed the momentum. I think in that first game, the Tampa Bay really, after getting kind of shell-shocked in the first period, they and after being off for so long, they were really at it in the second period. And then, it's overtime, anything can happen. So that was very interesting. The second game, I mean, I don't know what happened to Tampa Bay. It looked like they were completely overwhelmed by playing in Colorado, playing in that arena. And you're right. After two games, the Lightning has no chance to win a single game in this series. And then something happened.
Yeah. So last night, let's talk about that. Everybody seems to talk about the mile high altitude that is Denver. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I've heard the altitude is a thing for athletes if you're not used to it, particularly high performance athletes.
Yep.
We've seen this multiple times over the course of playoffs and series that, a change of venue seems to change the playoff series a little bit. The team that's trailing gets a little bit of energy coming home. They're in their home building, they're comfortable, they're fans, they're everything. Was that what it was last night, or what did you see last night?
Yeah, I think you know what I think it's a few things. You can't know for sure because you're not in the dressing room and you're not one of these guys. But you and I know from watching lots of sports and you and I competing in different things. Number one, guys that have been around a while have a lot of pride, right? Like Tampa Bay is not easily going to hand over the reins as Cup champions, and to be embarrassed, whether that's on home ice or on the road, 7-0. I mean, that's not good, right? So there's a lot of pride in that dressing room. There's a lot of veteran guys who've been there, who've done it, and they don't want to be embarrassed, right? So they came out with a much better effort. That's number one on the third game or the game last night. Number two, I think they used their home crowd to their advantage. And that's kind of what I was going to say too. You and I each picked this series to go 7 games. I still think it could go 7 games. The way this is playing out, each team is going to use their home ice to their advantage, and it's going to go 7 games. And Colorado, probably, maybe Tampa Bay, he flips it in game 7 to change the trend. But I think you're just going to see home teams winning all the way throughout. And what it tells me is, what we've seen the last few years with not having fans in the building in the playoffs or whatever, it's a downer, right? Like the players, they need the fans. Yes, it's hockey and they're professionals and you go da 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 da, but fans and the home crowd and the enthusiasm and the noise, it all adds to it. It adds to it as a huge challenge for the visiting team and a huge advantage, I think, to the home team. So, and you're seeing it play out that way. How does a team lose 7-0 2 nights earlier and then win 6-2 2 nights later and look completely different? I mean, and it's not just fluke. I mean, Tampa Bay played well. They played very well defensively. And to begin, Vasilevsky, was way better. He was off on that second game against Colorado in Colorado and played way better. And there you go. So be very interesting now set up for Wednesday night. What's going to happen? How about for you? How did you see it?
Here's a question for you before I get my opinion into this scenario. Did we make too much of game 2?
Well, I don't know. You're asking me if I did. I never made too much of it because I know it's off the radar. When you have games like that, you know what coaches always say, and you hear them all the time. They say, "Oh, I throw that videotape in the garbage. I don't even look at it. I don't even show it to the guys." What's the point of trying to break down a game when you lose 7-0? You just take that video, you throw it away. Everyone in that room, all those guys know what they did wrong because they're pros, and you throw it away and you say, we start with a new slate at the next game. So I don't think it says much. I don't think it's a blip.
And it's just a blip that happened to go in the favor of the team that won the first game in overtime.
Yeah, and Colorado's a good team.
Right away makes it look like, and I think I'm guilty of this too, it right away makes it look like even more of a lopsided series than it might be, because one could argue that Tampa returned the favor as far as blowouts go last night at home. What do you make of the way that and again, my opinion is I think too I'm guilty of overreacting. I see that overtime game and I see that that 7-0 beatdown, and I have to remind myself the home team has not lost in this series leading up to last night, and that still stands true.
Yep.
There's that old adage of Stanley Cup playoff series or any playoff series in general doesn't start until the home team loses. I think that would be interesting. But yeah, no, I just like I don't want to make too much of the first 2 games, but I also don't want to make too much of last night's game. And I think game 4 is going to tell us a lot about what this series is going to be. Because is it like game one, or do we keep it changing lopsided scores like what we had in game uh, two and in game three? And of course, if Colorado goes up 3-1 coming home, well, they have a chance to win the Stanley Cup on Friday night in Colorado. But I think that, as logic would suggest, we're in for a good game tomorrow. We're in for a good game tomorrow, and it would not surprise me, Rick, if we come back to Colorado and Ball Arena tied 2-2.
Sure.
And again, maybe, there's a lot of people making a lot of assumptions about, Nathan McKinnon's body language last night in the third period. Well, let me just tell those people. Would your body language be any different if you just had your doors blown off you in a hockey game, but you clearly lose interest in late in the third period because of the score?
Right. And remember, we should remind people, Colorado, this is their fourth round. They've won 3 series.
Yeah.
They've never been hammered in any of the 3 series. They've lost really close games to LA and to Edmonton. And who was it? No, LA. I don't know who they played, or Minnesota. I can't remember, but all their series, or it was
No, they came to Minnesota,
Nashville, and then Edmonton. Okay. Not once in those 3 series did they get hammered. They didn't get blown out there. When they lost, it was a close game, maybe in overtime, maybe with an empty net goal by a couple of goals, 3-1 or 4-2. This is unique to them. This is actually very good because it makes the series very compelling. Because I agree, we got one of the listeners is saying they got taught a lesson. Like this is not going to be easy. They've kind of rode their wave, and now they got a punch in the face, if you will, a theoretical or hypothetical punch in the face from the Bolts to say, you're not going to take the cup that easy from us. And so now it's interesting. How do they react? They're younger. They haven't been there. They're a good team. What do they do in response, right? And I said this before to you, and I still believe it to be true. I always will. Game 4 in a 7-game series is the linchpin game, because you either win if you're up 3-0, or you lose if you're down 3-0. And if you're other ways, it's going to be one team's going to have a pair of wins and one's going to have one. And so the series after game 4 either goes to 3-1 or 2-2, and that changes everything. So I think the team that wins the 4th game in a 7-game series ends up winning the series 70 or 80% of the time. I saw over the history of the NHL. So it's a very compelling stat, and it'll be very interesting to see how Colorado responds, because they haven't been here. They have not gotten punched in the face by any team. Hypothetically, I'm not saying literally, but hypothetically, they haven't been punched in the face in a hockey game yet to sort of, wow, oh, gee, we're going to have to work here. They've kind of, not that's easy, but they've kind of rode through and rode the wave of all the hysteria over them and everything else. And now you got a veteran team and Stanley Cup champs, and they're saying, we're not as easy a rollover as you think. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's also interesting, right? Because one team has been tested in these playoffs, and that being Tampa, and the other team hasn't really been tested.
Well, I wouldn't say hasn't been tested, but I would agree with you. I think the road here has been much harder for Tampa Bay. They've had to get through a much harder gauntlet, if you will, of teams.
Yeah, it included 7 games to the Toronto Maple Leafs. It also included being down 2-0 to the Rangers. So been here, done that as far as Tampa's concerned. Rob also says game 4 is now the pivotal game. The team that wins the series will inevitably win the series. It's absolutely essential that the Avs win this game. I fired back with, who is this a must-win for? I would argue it's a must-win game for Tampa because of the success that the Avs have at home. And even if they lose the game, it's 2 out of 3 at home in Colorado. Should this get back to a 2-2 series? Fair to say it's a must-win for Tampa tomorrow, given the fact that they would have to go into Colorado and win twice?
Yep. it's a must win for the Bolts for sure, because somehow, let's say, and I think they will. I think Tampa Bay will win tomorrow, so that'll make it 2-2. Tampa Bay still has to find a way in that high altitude, in that crazy arena with those nutty Avalanche fans going nutso all game long, screaming and standing up. They're gonna have to find a way to overcome that and win on the road one game. And that's either going to be game 5 or game 7. And they haven't shown that they can do it yet in Colorado, especially after the game 2 ending. So but they have to, they are not, if they lose tomorrow, they're not going to win 3 straight, 2 of 3 on the road. That's just not going to happen. So,
right.
But at least in my mind, it's possible, but I just don't see it happening. So, but hey, what do you think of that? Of that shot of Devin Taves on Kucherov?
The slash?
Well, it was a cross check in the hip as he was going down and ramming him into the boards.
Well, if you want to open this can of worms, I haven't exactly been satisfied with the officiating in this series, but like, to me, right, if somebody's going down to the boards and down to the ice and falling down near the boards, like, to me, that's dangerous. A sprawling body toward the boards and then being, I don't want to say helped, because that's not what happened, but there were some reckless plays that did happen in that area of the ice.
Yep.
Personally, I didn't like it. Will the NHL do something about it? I don't think so.
I don't think it's a suspendable play. You know what it is for me? It's just a little bit of a dirty play. I know it's the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's the final series. It's a Stanley Cup final, all those things. But I just think it's a little bit of a dirty play. It was a penalty. They called a penalty, which was right. But see, again, this whole respect for other players, respect for the game. Like, I'm all for being tough, for being physical, all the body checking, the pushing and shoving in front of the net. That's all good stuff. But a superstar comes down the side and he's gone by you. He has beaten you, and to slow him down or whatever, you cross-check him on the hip. I mean, it's a dirty play. Cross-checking in the shoulders where a guy has some padding in front of the net, that's one thing. But on the hip, the guy's skating, he's exposed. It's over top of his pants. There's nothing there. It's just his rib cage and his side of his trunk. And it's all underneath the jersey. There's nothing there except for an undershirt. It's a dirty play. It's just, and then I don't know if he hurt his ribs or got winded. I think it was more his groin, or something. It looked like either his knee or his groin, because he kind of went down awkwardly with his legs, right? So, but I heard the point is very doubtful for tomorrow, but Kucherov is quite probable. Here's
the interesting thing. If you want to talk about Braden Point, let's talk about the effort of Nick Paul yesterday. Oh man!
He only had one leg when he scored that goal.
Shoot off the ice in the first period, then coming back to score that goal. I never question the intensity of a player like Nick Paul. He can be, and that might be one of the best acquisitions at this year's trade deadline. Sneaky good. Nobody made anything of it, at the time. But, it's proven to be very, very good with a lot of sandpaper, kind of trying to reenact the Blake Coleman, Yanni Gourde-esque line.
He has fit that role with Pat Maroon. He and Pat Maroon have kind of fit that role that, especially, I agree with you, Blake Coleman gave, that kind of that honest play, gritty, kill penalties, really good in your own end, give the superstars a break and still have a chance to score a goal because he's got some offensive ability.
And what's remarkable is Nick Paul does everything within the whistle without going over the line when it comes to that physical stuff. Like
Yep.
he he's one of those players with that I really admire that plays hard in between the whistles, but knows when enough is enough to not take a penalty, but when the time comes, would be willing to stand up for his teammates.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
that's why, yeah, I was going to
that's
say,
a
and
player
that's
that
why,
watched that line so good.
yeah, and that's why, even though I love soccer to watch it, that's why hockey is my favorite sport, because especially you North American hockey players, Canadians, Americans, there's too much pride in their game. There's pride in how they play. They honor the game. They respect the game. They don't dive. They don't flop around. They don't fake injuries. They gut it out, especially in the playoffs. They go to the bench with a really bad ache or whatever, and the trainer comes over and says something, goes, no, I'm good, I'm good. They jump around and they stretch and whatever, and they go out again the next shift, even though they're aching, their bodies are aching. Soccer players don't always do that. They go down too easy and they stay down for too long. Hockey players, or at least the North American hockey players, aren't like that, and that's why I love the game, because it's so honest.
What did you think of Cale Makar and Devon Toews yesterday? To me, this looked like the first game in the series. Quite frankly, maybe in the playoffs, where the two didn't quite have the impact that we're used to seeing them have. Do we trot this down to a bad game for them along with the rest of their teammates? And let's move on to game 4.
Yeah, I mean, they're good hockey players. I mean, listen, I love Cale Makar. I think he looked fantastic in a Jet uniform. So he's like Neil Pionk on the next level of what a Neil Pionk is, right? I mean, Neil Pionk is like he's a shadow of Cale Makar, and Devon Toews is just an honest defenseman, plays tough, strong puck movers. But you know what the key to that is that I think Tampa Bay has figured this out. Colorado is good in their own end. They don't have monster defensemen or these big, tough, guys who clear the front of the net, whatever. You know what they do really well? They get pucks, they get shot in, or they come in, they turn them over, and they get pucks out again. And these puck-moving defensemen, Makar, Toews, Byram, they skate, boom, and the puck goes out. So if the puck is out of your end all the time, you don't have to defend for 3-4 minutes, the team cycling and smacking you around. That's what the Jets have such a hard time with. They get caught up in their own zone. They can't get the puck out as a team, and then they get cycled, and then their smallness and their lack of toughness overall as a defensive group gets exposed, except for Brendan Dillon. But the rest of them, it gets exposed. And then the Jets get scored against. And that's the forwards, that's defensemen, that's how Hellebuck handles the puck. It's all of that. But I'm saying Colorado, they get the puck out of their end quick with their skating and with their puck moving. And I think last night's game, Tampa Bay figured something out. I didn't watch it closely enough for that reason. But then when I saw some of the highlights, I thought I should look at the whole game again and just watch what Tampa Bay did to keep pressure on Colorado in their own zone, because that was the key. You forced Makar and Toews to play defense. I don't know if it was that they carried the puck in more as opposed to shooting it in, so trying to keep a possession so that they keep the Avalanche in their own zone and cycling and trying to make them play defense. But that was really important. And then you expose Makar and Toews for not being as good defensively as some.
It's interesting, right? Because we talked about it. What's the one thing we hear about when we talked about Colorado? It's neutralizing their speed, and Tampa did that. I thought to great effect last night.
Yeah.
They let they let Colorado have their moments in the offensive zone, but it was never, oh no, fire drill. 2.5 minutes of hard, physical, grind me down offensive zone possession, which is interesting. And again, to me, I just want to see game 4, Rick. Where are we in this series? Are we like game 1, or are we like 2 and 3? I think we'll get that indication very early tomorrow, if not in Game 5.
I think it's going to be a close game tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be a blowout either way. I think both teams realize, Colorado realizes how important it is to try and get up 3-1, and Lightning realize how important it is they don't go down 3-1 going back to Colorado. So I think each team is going to overemphasize playing well defensively, and I think you're going to see, unless something explodes, like unless the dam breaks for one side, I think it's going to be a little bit more cautious, a little bit more defensively oriented, and a little bit more careful. And you could see a lower scoring game, maybe a 3-2 game with an empty net, or maybe 4-2, something like that. But we'll see.
Let's quickly talk about some other news in the NHL. There were some coaching vacancies filled this week. John Tortorella goes to Philadelphia.
Oh no, my Flyers.
I know. I know. And Brendan Dubinsky saying prayers to the Flyers players.
Brendan Dubinsky, he's played for. Oh yeah, that's right. He played for Tortorella in
on two occasions, and he did the emoji prayers to the Flyers players.
Right. Because he played for Tortorella in Columbus, right?
In Columbus, right? Yeah. And apparently that didn't go very well for him.
Ask Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Yeah. So just ask those two how it goes. Where are we on the Flyers? Like, to me, great young team trying to force sort of this. We were led to believe they were rebuilding. They brought in some pieces to correct what they thought were problems last year on the defense.
Yeah.
What are the Flyers? Like, to me, they have 1 foot in as a Stanley Cup contender. They have another foot in this rebuild. What are they?
You talking Flames or Flyers?
Flyers.
Okay, you said Flames, so it kind of threw me there. But okay, Flyers are, you know what? I don't know what they are, because they had some older players. They said goodbye to Giroux. He's sort of the last of the old guard. They've got some established players there, and they've got some youngsters. So, but they have a great goalie in Carter Hart. So I know this. Tortorella, I would never want him coaching the Jets. I shouldn't say that, because he would make for great post-game and pre-game interviews, and just like with the Claude Noel. But it'd be a nightmare. And I think Tortorella, he will deny it, but he has a reputation that he will come in and he will be tough. He will expect everything from his players. He will communicate well. He will be hard on them, and he will get the absolute very best from them. And Philadelphia will be a very good team next year. Are they a playoff team? I don't know. Bubble depends on what else they do. If Carter Hart has a bounce back season, but they're going to play much better defensively. They're going to skate. They're going to forecheck. They're going to force you to play well to beat them. It's good. Philadelphia will play honest, and Tortorella will turn that team around next year and the year after. And in 2 to 3 years, they will be a pretty good team. And then what is that called? The life expectancy of Tortorella as a head coach in a city will arc the 2-3 years, and then it'll be over. And the players will revolt, or something will happen. Look at in Vancouver. It was 1 season, 1 year in Vancouver. Columbus was 3 years. New York was 2.5, 3 years. The Lightning actually was his longest stay, and that's because he won the Stanley Cup. So I think he was able to stay a little bit longer. I think it was like 6 or 7 years, but he will get the most out of that team. I saw an interview with him, and he was saying, I don't know if I'm not calling this a rebuild or whatever. He says it's a retool. He says it's a re-energize. He says, I'm going to be hard on the players. They're going to skate. He is going to bag them. He is going to have them in the very best shape that they can be. It will be hard to play against the Philadelphia Flyers next year. I know that, because that's the way Tortorella coaches. So, and it'll be entertaining. I'm so glad he's coaching again, because on Sports Center, you'll always have a little something to look forward to on a night when the Flyers play. So it'll be awesome.
Yeah, and the sound bites when things go terrible, which is more often than not with the current team.
Well, depending upon how Philadelphia does, you're right. If he's not getting the best out of them, then it will be very frustrating. But if you go online, it's so funny. I went online the other day and looked on YouTube. They have all the best of John Tortorella, the best quotes, the funniest quotes, when he gets the most angry or whatever, and they're hilarious. You just watch it, just one after another. They got like 2 hours of the very best of or the very worst of John Tortorella. It's hilarious.
So again, right? It's a personality. It's a fiery personality back in the game.
He'll add color.
But it's funny, and Rob kind of alludes to this a little bit. Torts will suit what Philly needs in a coach, but he can't go overboard with his criticism. Otherwise, he'll lose the room.
Yeah, but he always does because he goes too far. He just, although he has said he's softened. He has said.
But here's the issue, though. When you think of the philosophy of the Philadelphia Flyers, you know, that rough and tumble, Broad Street bullies, physical, mean, and nasty.
Yeah.
Does that not personify John Tortorella in a way?
Yeah, but you have to listen. Yeah, that's their persona, but they always had guys that could kind of fill that role. If you look at their roster now, they don't have many guys that fit that bill. That's the problem, right? So you can't say, oh, the Flyers, the rough and tumble. That's a reputation from 50 years ago that they don't even closely represent anymore. They've got a great goalie. They've got a couple of good defensemen. They got a few good forwards. They got a lot of young players, a couple of veterans, but they're not rough and tumble. But I just think Philadelphia's going to be, Tortorella's going to get the very best out of that team. He'll put them in great shape, and they will lose a lot of games 2-1, and they'll win a lot of games 2-1. And that will be the Philadelphia Flyers.
Here's the question for you. Knowing what you know now, assuming, you know, June 21st holds, longest day of the year, by the way, who do you like more, Philadelphia or Winnipeg, as far as expectations for the season?
Who is Winnipeg's head coach?
Knowing what you know now.
Well, I still want the Jets. The Jets have way more talent on their roster right now, as of today, all things being equal. Like not having a head coach in Philadelphia or Winnipeg, just having the roster, Philadelphia has not as much talent as Winnipeg does. But it's getting the most out of that talent, right? It's everything coming together. I heard Cheveldayoff and some of the players talking at the end of the season when they had their exit interviews with the media there. And it's so true. Every team thinks they're going to make the playoffs. Every team thinks they got a chance. And I think that team, the Jet team last year, with the acquisitions they made and the different tweaking and so on and so forth, they really thought they were a playoff team with a chance to be a cup contender, depending upon all the pieces blended together. And then they had COVID and injuries to start the season. They started off still pretty good. I think they went 9-3-3 in their first 15. And then it just went downhill from that. And I think they all were shocked by the level of achievement relative to what their expectation was. And so now again, this year, we don't even know if there's a head coach, or we don't know who the head coach is going to be. I don't know. I still think the Jets are way ahead of the Philadelphia Flyers. The Jets still need to do something. They still need to tweak that team somewhat. I think they're going to have to bring in more of their younger players, like we talked about before, Perfetti, Heinola, Samberg, Stanley, Morgan Barron. These guys are going to have roles on this team next year. Those 5 or 6 guys, and they're going to have to push out some veterans, which is going to free up some cap space and allow the Jets maybe to go out and make some trades or do some acquisitions, because you can't expect, even with a new coach, you can't expect completely new results if you have the exact same roster you did last year. It didn't work. So I don't know, just to say, well, we'll get a new coach and then all these same pieces will fit together and will make sense. I don't think so. There's something and see, that's the thing. I can't figure out what it is. I wish I could look and say it's this thing, whatever this thing is with the Jets. And I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a whole bunch of things that aren't quite right that mixed together made for a season of underachievement. And how do you fix that? I think you got to address all those little things. But what those little things are exactly, I don't know. I suspect, and I think the Jets probably have a pretty good idea, but it'll be interesting to see. But I'll be very disappointed. Maybe I'll wrap it up by this way. I'll be very disappointed if the Jets go into the season with a brand new head coach, even if it's Trotz, and otherwise everything else is the same in terms of their lineup. That would really disappoint me.
Quickly, just to wrap up. When we sit here a week from now, are we talking about a Jets head coach or a few more days beyond that?
A few more days. I heard Trotz wants to announce it before July 1. Is that right? Yeah. And I think that makes sense because that gives you, and what the Jets would want by July 1 too, because that gives you 2 weeks before the draft where you can acclimatize that coach into your meetings, your scouting reports, your strategies, your discussion for the draft and for free agency. So I think, but who knows? It could be sooner. Please tell me that it's Barry Trotz. You know what I heard, by the way? I don't know if you heard this. Rumor has it that the Flyers offered Trotz $7 million, or what is said to be $7 million a year on a 4-year contract, but no chance to move into management, just a 4-year, $7 million a year head coach job. And he turned it down. Is that true? You heard that too? Oh, I lost you.